Good evening, everyone. I call to order this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. We have 6 members present and our student representative. We do have a quorum. At this time, Board Member Linda Murray will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Thank you. This time we'll have approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions, any discussion of the agenda? Okay, all those in favor of approval of the agenda, please raise your right hand. Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes and the student member concurs. Motion carries. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the approval of the work session minutes dated Tuesday, October 20th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the work session of October 20th? Okay, then we'll move for approval. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, we're unanimous with 6 votes, and the student member concurs.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, October 20th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any questions, discussion, closed session minutes, any additions or corrections? Then we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of the approval of the closed session minutes of October 20th, please raise your right hand. Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Motion carries.
And for the final motion, I move for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, October 20th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any additions or corrections to the business meeting minutes? Okay, and we're voting on approval of the business meeting minutes of October 20th. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. 6 votes, unanimous, with the student rep concurring. This time we'll have public comment. We have 2 people signed up this evening. Our first speaker is Mr. Neil Becker. Good evening, Mr. Becker. Just to review our COVID-19 pandemic public comment protocol, each speaker may speak up for up to 5 minutes. Mr. Bickford is our timekeeper. We ask that our speakers introduce themselves, identify whether they're speaking as individuals or on behalf of an organization, and speakers may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except for personnel or student matters that clearly identify an individual or individual. Thank you.
Thank you, President Williams. My name is Neil Becker. I'm president of the Washington County Teachers Association. And tonight I'm speaking as the president, though I'm also a spouse of an employee and the father of a student in the school system. So good evening, President Williams, board members, Dr. Michael, and staff. As I speak tonight, there are surveys soliciting input from families and staff regarding moving to a new reopening stage and expanding in-person instruction. I know you've been receiving calls and emails since the announcement and the opening of the surveys. I don't need to address every issue and every topic related to the expansion. I'll be brief this evening. Other speakers tonight may have some personal and professional experiences that they'll share with you. But I've submitted my comments to you electronically. They'll be arriving via your email any minute now. And they include some excerpts from educators throughout the county. I'm pleased that WCPS is requesting feedback from the community members, the educators, all stakeholders. And I reiterate what I've shared with WCPS leadership over the last few weeks. Educators want to work with students. They want to be in schools with their students when it's safe to do so. That's why they're educators, school counselors, administrators, support personnel. We did not choose this vocation to work from a keyboard. We thrive on the interaction we have with students as they acquire knowledge. Since the onset of the pandemic, WCTA has advocated for sensible, measured steps and for partnering with educators to develop plans. The positivity rate has been climbing upward, and recent COVID-positive cases in WCPS facilities and teams exemplify what we must avoid. Based on health experts, expanding in-person instruction as early as November 30th could prove to be problematic for our students and staff. Family gatherings, such as large Thanksgiving events, have proven to be spreader events. Introducing more students to schools so close to such an event would be too risky for WCPS, its students, and its staff. Neighboring jurisdictions are closing schools, quarantining entire grades, and/or scaling back their reopening plans. WCPS cannot rush into a new stage and jeopardize either our students' education or the health of students and their educators. Getting feedback from staff and families regarding a new stage, potentially beginning in marking period 3, such as on January 26th, would be prudent. We would be distanced from the gatherings that are likely to take place as families celebrate Thanksgiving in November and other occasions and religious events in December. A January date would give staff time to prepare their schedules and buildings, and families would have time to prepare for transportation and childcare. As board members and WCPS staff consider reopening stages and feedback from stakeholders, please take into consideration an expansion in January if the metrics prove such an expansion would be reasonable and prudent. And to Mr. Ridenauer, as your tenure winds down, I thank you for your service as a board member. I know you're a short timer. Best wishes to you in your next chapter of life. And thank you, board members, Dr. Michael, and staff for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Our next speaker is Jessica Burton. Good evening, Ms. Burton.
Good evening.
Just reading from the COVID-19 pandemic protocol that we have adopted for public speaking, public comment. Each speaker may speak for up to 5 minutes. Speakers should introduce themselves, identify whether they are speaking as individuals or on behalf of an organization, and you may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except personnel or student matters that clearly identify an individual or individuals. Mr. Bickford is our timekeeper. He has cards that he will raise.
Yellow means you got about 30 seconds left, and then red means to wrap up.
Okay.
Okay, so you may begin. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, Dr. Boyd, Michael, and board members. I want to start by saying the statements I'm making are reflective of myself and teachers and staff who have reached out to me. First and foremost, please understand we want our kids back. We miss them and our daily interactions. They are the sole reason we chose this profession. We want our buildings to continue to be a safe place for our students. WCPS staff have significant concerns that have been pushed to the wayside. The first is health. Last week, Washington County had a 1.7% increase in cases in less than 1 week. We were told to prepare for phase 4 within a month's period of time on that same day. Schools cannot control the spread of flu, strep, or even lice, but being asked to control a highly contagious virus during a pandemic seems impossible. I've been told of instances where staff were uninformed of positive cases from students and of coworkers. As the CDC guidelines have changed regarding those close contacts, are we adapting our policies to protect our staff and students? Because of the nature of our job, we are all in close contact with our in-person students and staff. The second major concern is time. Staff are being asked to do 2 jobs all day, every day. Concurrent teaching model forces us to choose between those in person and those online. The current teaching model requires additional time for planning and grading. This means working on our own time and to do it effectively, thus impacting our mental well-being. Planning time is sometimes not happening or being interrupted due to encore classes losing their classrooms and teaching from a cart. There are limited safe spaces for staff to work. Outside areas are no longer an option due to weather. Being asked to clean as much as possible, even in-class restrooms, is unacceptable. We need more custodians to clean the building properly and according to safety protocols. Counselors and social workers are given extra duties and then asked to cover even more and still expected to reach and maintain the mental and emotional needs of our students and families. Observations during this pandemic only adds to the level of our stress, especially when only assessing teachers based on a traditional teaching model, and the only adjustment to the CDM is physical spacing of a classroom. Having to create SLOs using data that is incomplete and incorrect seems dishonest and a waste of our time. Meanwhile, the district is not having an SLO this year. Keep in mind, when we create our SLOs based on the students we currently have and their needs, moving to phase 4 means that there's a possibility of our students changing teachers. WCPS continues to refuse negotiations on our contract, meanwhile adding duties and expectations while poorly communicating and refusing to hear our voices. The third consideration is space. Teachers are making 6-foot poles and rearranging rooms to maximize space for students to return, and then told to get creative, make it happen for even more students. We are getting rid of personal items to fit more desks and tables, and this is not the least restrictive environment for our students to be successful in their education. And it is nearly impossible to keep students 6 feet apart all day long. Ultimately, transparency, communication, collaboration, and consideration are key to solving many frustrations of your most valuable assets of WCPS, your teachers and staff. November 30th is just days after one of many big holidays with family gatherings. The CDC and local health officials cite family gatherings as a leading cause of transmission. This will unnecessarily put students and staff at risk if we return during this time frame. I am a stakeholder in WCPS and want all of our families and students to be successful. I am ever dedicated to the vision and mission of Washington County Public Schools, the students, and the community. Just as teachers are constantly assessing and evaluating an ongoing lesson, seeing that it's unsuccessful as we planned, we take action and look for multiple solutions and make immediate change for our students and their success. My question to all of you is, are you willing to consider this feedback from teachers and look for other options for reopening plans that better align with the health and safety of staff and students? In closing, I want to extend an invitation to my classroom without filter or censor and see how concurrent teaching is going. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. At this time, we'll have board member response to public comment. Colleagues, any comment? Mr. Bickford?
My only response is thank you for coming in. I know it's hard to do and for speaking to us. And I know we've talked about SLOs, but what is SLO?
Student learning objectives.
Student Learner Objective. And who requires those?
State. Unfortunately, as I indicated to the board, I'd gladly get rid of SLOs, even evaluations, observations, but they're being required by the state.
Mr.
What is
Stouffer?
your school again?
Salem Avenue.
Elm Avenue?
grade do you teach?
I'll
I
be
teach-
making an appointment with you.
Very great. I teach first grade.
Again, thank you very much for coming in and
Thank you for having
offering
me
your
and
comments.
listening.
We have no old business to conduct this evening, so we'll move to our first item of new business, which is the consideration of a donation of a live streaming camera system. Good evening, Dr. Akers.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Michael. I'm here on behalf of North Hagerstown High School to request your approval of a generous donation of $9,332.46 from the North High Booster Club. The donation will be used to equip Callis Stadium with the capacity to live stream events. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Akers. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve a donation of a live streaming camera system, including installation, valued at $9,332.46 from North High Boosters Club, Inc. to North Hagerstown High School.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford. Do we have any questions for Dr. Akers? Any comments? Yes, Mr. Stauffer?
Okay. When will this be installed and made operational? And
It will be ready to go right away.
oh, okay.
Mrs. Murray?
Is it replacing an older system, or is it something new to the stadium?
Well, a lot of schools have sort of kind of created their own method of live streaming certain events, but it's not been, with equipment designed specifically for that purpose. It's just using cameras and computer equipment. And, like I know when I was principal at South High, we had a club that did it, but it wasn't really with equipment designed specifically for that purpose. So this will be a much higher quality of live streaming than what we've done in the past.
Any other questions? Okay. Nope. Then we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve a donation of a live streaming camera system being donated by the North High Boosters Club to North Hagerstown High School. All those in favor? Right, we have 6 affirmative votes, student member concurring, motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Akers.
Thank you.
Our next item of business is this evening's consent agenda with Mr. Bakewell, Supervisor of Purchasing. Good evening, Mr. Bakewell.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight, I have only one item for your review. This item was reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and is being recommended for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bakewell. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the purchase of 500 Huddle cameras to B&H Photo and Electronics Corps at a cost of $119,348.22.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions for Mr. Bakewell or any discussion? Mr. Gessford?
Just one question. I know that recently we purchased 400 and then another additional 500 and now another 500. Would this finish up the purchasing of all the classes that we need, or do we need more?
Mr. Gessert, at the time we originally purchased the huddle cams, we anticipated we'd primarily be using them in middle school and high school. With our change to stage 4, with grades 2, 3, 4, and 5 now being an A-Day, B-Day as well, we wanted to expand to make sure that we've had enough to cover all those classes if teachers chose to use them.
Yes, Mr. Stauffer?
Yeah, I see this is from a grant. What's the source of this grant?
It's one of our grants from the like CARES money and things. We have so many names for them. I've
It's
lost
the tutoring grant.
the tutoring grant.
Yeah.
So our school system, I think, was given about $3 million for our tutoring grant, and this was eligible to be supported with that money.
Yes, Mr. Bucum?
How long is it going to take the shipments to arrive, and then how quickly can they be installed and used in classrooms?
So the shipments, that's a good question. Right now, of the roughly 900 that we've ordered, I think we've gotten in a couple hundred, and I believe there's another 330 due at the end of November. That's the next iteration we've been given a ETA on. The other ones we have not been given an ETA on. So those we ordered about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So you're looking at like 7-8 weeks lead time. I anticipate the vendor will catch up at some point, but these are getting ordered all throughout the country. We're at their kind of mercy for how quickly they can get them. As far as installing them, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a fairly quick
Yeah, I mean,
quick
they
install.
clip them on top of your computer. They're very easily to install, depending
Okay.
upon how you want to set them up.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move to the vote. We're voting on the approval of the purchase of 500 huddle cameras. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs, motion carries. Our next item of business is the FY 2021 budget adjustment for the first quarter. At least I think it's for the first quarter. Did I make that up?
Well,
It's
we
not for the
are-
first quarter.
it's to this point in the year.
This point in the year.
We're not calling them quarterly anymore because we may be bringing them to you more or less frequently than quarterly. So we're just calling them requested FY21 budget adjustments. Good evening, President Williams and board members and Dr. Michael. From time to time, we do bring you adjustments that cross budget categories. These kind of changes that cross major categories as defined in state law require the approval of you and the commissioners. So upon your approval of these tonight, we will take them, we will call the commissioners and get scheduled for a meeting down there. These adjustments were reviewed with the Finance Committee on Tuesday, October 27th. We are making adjustments for things that we feel that we have, for savings that we've projected based on the situations in the pandemic, as well as some redeployments requested, decreasing certain lines and increasing others that were requested by various instructional supervisors and directors as they get into managing their accounts and ordering supplies for the new year.
Thank you, Mr. Brandenburg. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the proposed FY 2021 budget adjustments as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Ridenour. Any questions? Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Bickford.
This Finance Committee reviewed these budget adjustments at our last meeting and moved them forward for the full board's approval. I think what was most interesting to me was the loss in revenue from interest income. So, David, could you just explain why we are losing that interest income revenue?
Yes, there's been a dramatic decrease in interest rates on government obligations. We are only authorized to invest in government agency notes like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, and Treasury notes and bonds. and those have seen dramatic decreases in rates just since the pandemic started. And investments that we had that had maybe a 2-year maturity are being called early, and maybe they were earning 1.75% to 2%, and I'm replacing them with securities that are $5 or $6 million in face value, and we're only getting 0.1%, or thereabouts. So our interest income is going to be dramatically decreased this year relative to our budget, because the fall off in interest rates has happened since we planned our budget last year.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, then our motion is to approve the proposed FY 2021 budget adjustment as presented by Mr. Brandenburg. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. We have 6 affirmative votes, student member concurring. Thank you, Mr. Brandenburg.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next item under consideration is the adoption of the Washington County Board of Education's 2021 legislative program and the approval of the legislative response team members and the legislative representative for the 2021 Maryland legislative session. We discussed our legislative program at our recent work session held on the 20th of October. At that time, we decided on we reviewed and decided on our core values, on our legislative priorities, our legislative watch list, and we agreed upon the legislative response team members. At this time, I'm looking for 3 separate motions. One for approval of the legislative program. Mrs. Murray?
I'm just curious, do we have to read them separately and vote on them separately?
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. So I'm
I'll
looking
start.
for a motion to approve the legislative program for 2021.
Williams, I move to approve the Washington County Board of Education's legislative program for the 2021 Maryland legislative session as discussed at the work session on October 20th, 2020, and the executive summary.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any questions, any discussion? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve this year's legislative program. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Looking for a second motion to approve the appointment of the members of the legislative response team for this year.
Mrs. Williams, I move to approve the appointment of Board of Education members Melissa Williams, Stan Stauffer, and Peter Bickford, along with the superintendent, chief legal counsel, and legislative representative to the legislative response team as discussed at the work session on October 20th, 2020.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guessford. Any questions, discussion? If not, we'll move for the vote to approve the appointment of this year's legislative response team as read by Mrs. Murray. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes and a student member concurs. And I'm looking for a third motion for approval of the appointment of Mrs. Ardith Cade as the Washington County Board of Education's legislative representative.
Mrs. Williams, I move to approve the appointment of Mrs. Cade as the Washington County Board of Education's legislative representative as discussed at the work session on October 20th, 2020.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guessford. Any questions, any discussion? We'll move to the vote. The move is to approve the appointment of Mrs. Cade as the Washington County Board of Education's legislative representative. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you all. Our next item under consideration is appointments to Board of Education advisory committees. Dr. Pugh, good evening.
President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. As discussed earlier today in closed session, you presented a slate of membership for one of the advisory committees, and I'm here to ask for your approval of that.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Is there a motion?
I move to approve proposed candidates for membership on one of the Board of Education advisory committees.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert.
Pickford?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bickford. It was Mr. Gessert who made the motion. Thank you for the second, Mr. Bickford. Any questions for Dr. Pugh or any discussion? Then we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the proposed candidates for membership on one of the Board of Education's advisory committees. All those in favor, please raise your hand. We have 6 affirmative votes. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Okay, our next item of new business is an amendment to the naming rights agreement by and between the Board of Education of Washington County and the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation, Inc. Good evening, Mr. Martirano.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Michael. The agenda item before you this evening is an amendment to the naming rights agreement between the Board of Education and the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation. The foundation is proposing a new fundraising campaign relating to the placement of engraved brick pavers in the sidewalk in front of the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts and the new Vincent Rothgrow Academic Center. The foundation will be responsible for the management of the project and for all expenses relating to the installation and placement of the brick pavers. The sidewalk is technically located on city property, so the city of Hagerstown is requiring a licensing agreement with the foundation relating to this project. The board's approval this evening is contingent upon and subject to the approval and execution of a licensing agreement between the foundation and the city of Hagerstown. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the amendment to naming rights agreement by and between Board of Education of Washington County and Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation, Inc., contingent upon and subject to the full execution of a licensing agreement between the City of Hagerstown and the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation related to this project.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Any questions for Mr. Martirano? Any discussion, any comments? No? Then we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the amendment to the naming rights agreement by and between the Board of Education and the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation, Inc. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes and the student member concurs. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more item of new business, and that is the consideration of naming rights for Hancock Middle Senior High School Gymnasium. Good evening, Mr. Pugh. Mr. Prue, I'm having a darn time trying
The
to
mask,
talk with
Mrs.
this
Williams.
mask.
It's the mask. It's quite all right. Good evening, Mrs. Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. It's my pleasure this evening to present to you an opportunity of a naming rights for the Hancock Middle Senior High School Gymnasium. Within the last 2 months, the Board of Education received some correspondence and results of an online petition that was done by members of the Hancock community in an effort to have the gymnasium at the school renamed in honor of Jeffrey Spielman. Mr. Spielman passed in June of this year, was a 41-year teacher for Washington County and a prolific coach in the Hancock community. There is some other information in your packet, as well as a rendering of what the signage will look like above the doorway into the gymnasium at the Hancock School. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the topic.
Thank you, Mr. Prue. Is there a motion?
Madam President, move to approve the renaming of the Hancock Middle Senior High School Gymnasium as the Jeffrey Spielman Memorial Gymnasium.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions for Mr. Prue? Any discussion? No?
The only thing I would say about the matter is that it's one of the things I appreciated was that members of the community approached us about this opportunity, and it's nice to be able to do something nice for the Hancock community in his memory.
Indeed. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve the renaming of the Hancock Middle Senior High School Gymnasium as the Jeffrey Spielman Memorial Gymnasium? All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Prue. That concludes our new business for this evening. We'll move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
Thank you, President Williams, members of the board. Tonight, we have a number of superintendent reports we want to provide some updates to the board on. First of all, recognition for next week of National School Psychology Week. And have a gentleman here, Dr. Patrick Graveline. I'm still not going to get your name right, Patrick. I don't know why I can't get it right. He's going to present a proclamation to our virtual psychologists for next week. They do an excellent job. Patrick does a great job coordinating not only them, but so many, many other duties in his role. But next week is National School Psychology Week, and we want to recognize them. So, Patrick?
Good evening, and thank you for this recognition. Whereas all children learn best when they are healthy, supported, and receive an education that enables them to thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. And whereas school psychologists are specially trained to foster and deliver in the school and community mental health services and academic support that lower barriers to teaching and learning. And whereas school psychologists help children to thrive by nurturing their individual strengths across both personal and academic endeavors. Therefore, it is proclaimed that November 9th through the 13th, 2020 is observed by Washington County Public Schools as National School Psychology Awareness Week, presented this 3rd day of November 2020.
Okay, thank you. We want to, thank all of our psychologists and recognize them for next week. We won't have a board meeting, so that's why we wanted to do it in advance of next week. So we appreciate their service and what they do for our students. Next presentation, annually we provide an update to the board regarding kind of an HR update, recruitment, hiring, new teacher induction. And we have Mr. Timothy Haynes with us this evening. Kind of does a great job with our recruitment efforts, a lot of new ideas he's brought to Washington County in his tenure here with Washington County, and also Joni Burkhart is with us to share a little update on some of our new teachers, new teacher induction, a little background on them. So, Mr. Haynes?
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, and members of the board. Joni Burkhart and I are pleased to share information about WCPS teacher recruitment, hiring, and new teacher induction for the 2020-21 school year. Recruitment efforts are driven by creation of new positions and teacher turnover. Last year's turnover was consistent with our 5-year average of 127 teachers vacating positions per year. WCPS had a record number of teacher applications this past recruitment cycle, with the total number increasing by 47% over the previous year. One of the biggest impacts on recruitment was the increase to teacher starting salaries to the highest in Maryland, which the board approved in 2019. Additionally, the board's approval of the recruitment and retention coordinator position allowed for year-round recruitment in a wide variety of traditional and non-traditional venues. Positions are also advertised on job boards for diversity in education, speech-language pathology, STEM teaching positions, Maryland workforce development, and the Veterans to Teachers program. COVID-19 greatly affected spring recruitment. 13 of the 14 teacher recruitment fairs were canceled, 6 visits to college campuses were postponed, and 4 in-person screening days at WCPS were canceled. During the March shutdown, Human Resources quickly pivoted into virtual recruitment. Funds saved from fair registrations and hotel reservations were redirected into truck site advertising through the local company TransPromotion, We also contacted thousands of teacher candidates through email marketing and introduced text recruiting to allow for an immediate one-on-one connection with potential candidates. The pandemic changed how human resources onboarded new teachers, particularly with fingerprinting. We relocated to the Clear Spring room to allow for social distancing protocols and also installed a mobile hand washing unit for new hires and staff. Masks are required at all times and surfaces are disinfected between each appointment. WCPS welcomed 139 new teachers this school year. 11% self-identified as other than non-Hispanic white, and our new teachers are from 22 different states and 5 countries. Our new teachers earned bachelor's degrees from 64 different colleges and universities, with those top schools being Frostburg, Shepherd, Shippensburg, Salisbury, California University of Pennsylvania, Towson, Penn State, and WVU. 73 of our new teachers already hold a master's degree from 40 different colleges and universities, with those top schools being Frostburg, WVU, Mount St. Mary's, California University of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and Liberty. This is a snapshot of content areas hired for the year. A highlight of the year was a hiring of 8 speech-language pathologists. That's a record number of hires for that position. And that's thanks in large part to the board signing an MOU in winter of 2020 to increase the specialized salary incentive from $5,000 to $10,000. Many of our new teachers have previous connections to WCPS, including 30 former students and 30 substitute teachers. We also welcomed a nice mix of teachers with experience, with 59% having taught previously and 41% new to the profession. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Joni Burkhart, Supervisor of Professional Development, to talk about New Teacher Academy.
So after careful consideration, we did decide to continue with New Teacher Academy in August. And we were careful to maintain a safe environment that was also inclusive of learning the essential curriculum and the culture of Washington County Public Schools. And on our next slide, right here, you can see that these are the professional learning opportunities that we have for new teachers. And we have completed some of these, and we will continue to offer specific and job-embedded professional learning opportunities throughout this year. And on this last slide right here, you can see the practices, and really these are the people who work with new teachers and support new teachers every day. We want new teachers to feel confident, knowledgeable, student-focused, and we want them to continue the support process so that they can remain in Washington County for many years to come. So thank you all for listening to us and about the human resources and about the ongoing efforts that we have for new teachers. Do you have any questions for us?
Mr. Bickford?
Just, can you go back to the total teacher applications submitted? Because we moved through that fairly quickly.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know if they can do it on the screen as well, but just when I was reading through the packet and I saw that number, you know, just an absolute wow impact for me that we had. I knew being able, thanks to state funding, to increase our starting salary to the highest in Maryland would have an impact. I didn't realize it would have this much of an impact. And what was the percentage increase again?
47% from the previous year.
So, I mean, that's fantastic as we hope to recruit top teachers into our community and hope to improve the quality of life in our community, which I think all of us want to do. And I think there's an example right there of 1,832 people who want to work in our community, which is incredible. I know we can't hire them all, but when you have more applicants, what does that mean for the quality of the eventual hires that we get?
Well, one point of clarification, that's 1,832 applications, not necessarily individuals. They can apply for
139 got
Correct.
hired, correct?
Correct. So what that means is that it's a very large and deep pool. It means that our principals and assistant principals have a higher quality of talent to choose from. They have more people interviewing for those positions, and they can really find the best fit for that school and for the system. And as we broaden this out and we bring in more experienced, more people from other areas with different experiences, that enriches the county in itself. And it's ultimately the best for our students.
Congratulations.
Yes, Mr.
So,
Bickford.
quick question. With the total number of teacher applications, applications submitted and the number of people who got hired, that's a 7.5% acceptance rate. Is that standard and comparable to like other counties?
Well, again, it's 1,800 applications.
Yeah.
Those aren't individuals. They can apply for multiple positions, but that's also consistent from year to year. So it's a little harder to differentiate exactly how many that is. But that's a little bit, as you can see from the previous year, it was 1,245 applications, and I believe we hired somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 180 last year. So percentage-wise, we are doing better. I actually haven't compared that to other counties to see how that's compared, but it's a very good question, and it's something that I would look into.
I have a question. You mentioned that the 139 teachers, new teachers, came from 22 states and 5 countries.
Yes.
So my question, I guess, would be for Mrs. Burkhart. These teachers are coming experienced and knowing pedagogy. How do we support them with understanding the Maryland curriculum?
Right, this is an excellent question. Whenever you come in with an experience, you know something about teaching. So new teacher induction has to be able to offer something for somebody who's just graduating college and also for those who have experience. We have changed some of our practices according to the needs of what experienced teachers need. Developing some ideas around the essential curriculum, learning how to plan using the Washington County way, understanding the schools, understanding Maryland versus the states that you're coming from. So we take that all into consideration and continue to work with teachers, those experienced teachers, almost like 2 tracks. Here's the new, here's the pedagogical experience and the content, and then with the experienced teachers, here is, we know that you know about curriculum. Let's look at how Washington County does this, and what can we do for students in order to accelerate that learning at a quicker pace. So, and we have some very experienced teachers, they're excellent.
Thank you. And to note that you have more than half with an advanced degree, with a master's degree.
Yes.
Is that something that's unusual for a year to have that many?
Yes, we
New
are
teachers?
steadily seeing in the last 3 years in the data that we have kept that the experienced teachers, and I think that's thank you to your generosity of increasing the pay scale, we're attracting more experienced teachers. And so when that happens, we have to look at what we're doing and how we do it. And also, with those experienced teachers, how to keep them here, how to keep them attractive. And I think that goes back to the culture also of Washington County, creating that culture that people want to be here and be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing to bring these wonderful people into Washington County Public Schools. Yes.
Mrs. Burkhart already hit on this, but I think we have to keep doing what we can monetarily and in other supportive ways to keep these teachers here now that we've attracted them here. We can't let them get away then.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. While Mr. Haynes is here, I do want to recognize him at the end of my report. We're going to have a video. I think he was a big part in gathering some of that information. You don't get a chance to see Mr. Haynes very often. I think, too, our applications being up is credit to that position of a recruitment coordinator. So certainly that has been a wise investment to provide additional choice as well as increasing starting salary. But in doing so, we also increased salary across the board. I think like 3.7% that year, and I look forward to continue to work on the salary schedule the very best that we can. And thank Ms. Burkhart for her efforts with our new teachers. She makes them feel right at home. And a little bit different this year, and we'll have some new experiences as hopefully someday our teachers will welcome more students back in the future. So thank you both. Our next,
Thank you.
okay. Our next annual report is an update on our ACT and SAT data. Maureen Margovich and Dr. Gary Willow are going to make that presentation.
President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board, Dr. Will and I are pleased to present the data for the ACT and SAT for the graduating class of 2019-2020. The ACT is divided into 4 different sections with a composite score. We have an English section, a math section, a reading section, and a science section. Each are worth from 1 to 36 points, and then the composite is also worth from 1 to 36 points. For our graduating class of 1920, we had 109 students participate in the ACT. For them, we had an average score of 21.2 in English, 22.1 in math, 22.7 in reading, 22.3 in science, with a composite of 22.2. As in years past, we fell between the national levels and the state levels for ACT. ACT also provides a percentage of students who are ready for college level coursework in English, algebra, social studies, biology, and then meeting all 4. For our students, 70% were ready for English, 54% were ready for college level algebra, 47% were ready for social studies, 50% were ready for college level biology, and 32% of our students met all 4 areas. For SAT, there are 2 sections. The first is the evidence-based reading and writing, and the second is math. These are each from 200 to 800 points. The total score is 400 to 1,600 points. In this class, we had 765 participants taking the SAT. We were about the same for evidence-based reading and writing at 542 as an average score. The state decreased to 522, and the national average decreased to 528. For mathematics, we saw a slight increase to 539 from the previous year. The state decreased to 507, and the national decreased to 523. For the composite score, we remained the same at 1,080, while the state decreased to 1,029, and the national average decreased to 1,051. As with ACT, SAT also provides the metric for the students that are ready for college level courses. For SAT, we had 76% of our students ready for English through the evidence-based reading and writing. 54% of our students were ready for college level math, and 52% were ready in both areas.
We continue to look for ways that our curriculum aligns with SAT and ACT prep. I'm happy to share that there are 3 ways, regardless of whether a student is in person or in distance learning, that can still get daily practice questions on the College Board website. We have the Khan Academy multiple practice test as well for our students. And we have Apex, which we use for many of our content areas, but it also has an SAT prep program that our students can access for free. So that can be done in school or as part of distance learning or as something that a student chooses to do on their own. Are there any questions for us?
Mr. Bocone?
How are you encouraging students to participate in the different SAT preparations, and also are there any ACT preparation options available?
Yes, so a lot of what we do is at the school level. And so as part of the Naviance, the college and career pathways that our students get to go through, counselors meeting with students, newsletters home to parents. We look at students' PSAT scores from 10th grade and encourage students to take SAT and or ACT. I think it's important to note that many of our ACT test takers are also SAT test takers. There are some colleges that will look at both, and it really depends on the student's pathway. But yes, we do have the ACT prep questions available as well, although as we've shared, it's not as popular in Maryland as the SAT program is.
Other questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time, I'd like to ask Dr. Willow to stay and Dr. Pugh to join him. I want to do an update on our Return to Learn plan. Last week, we sent out several s'mores to staff and to parents. We sent one to parents notifying them that Washington County Public Schools would not be moving forward to stage 4 of the Return to Learn plan till at least November 30th. We want to give parents notice that obviously their child would not be in school during the month of November if they weren't part of stage 2 or stage 3. So that gave them some time for some long-term planning. Also to prepare staff for the potential sometime of stage 4 to come. Right now, November 30th is too far off for us to even begin to predict where we'll be with our health metrics. I can assure the public, the teaching staff, the Washington County Public Schools will not sabotage its own plan by bringing students back too early or recklessly or any of the terms that have been used. They would serve no purpose for us. So we obviously want to do it safely for our staff, safely for our students, the best interest of our students. Every day I continue to be challenged by, somewhat the lack of progress of our students to perform at the normal traditional levels at this point during their grade level, whatever that might be. I think some of our thriving, striving learners are struggling all the way to our most gifted children. And we just have to do the best we can during the pandemic. I can't thank our staff enough. I try to thank them. I try to be in a building or two every single day, visit every classroom if I possibly can, and thank our staff. They are working harder than ever. It's just unfortunate nature of virtual instruction and only part of the students being in person that we're not making the progress that we really would like to see for our children. But again, it is not due to lack of effort. It's just every day is a new day with COVID, and unfortunately, they're not good days necessarily all the time. So I do want to thank our staff for all their hard work. I do want to let the public know we would not start before the 30th, but I don't want them to get their hopes up too high about the 30th unless the metrics look extremely well for that time or sometime thereafter. I do think it's important that we return our students, as many as possible, to the classroom as soon as possible based on the information that we're looking at, but we will not do that if it's unsafe. This time, I'd like to ask Dr. Willow and Dr. Pugh if they would just run through some slides we put together for the board, and we'd be glad to answer any questions at the end of that.
Thank you. Good evening again. Our purpose is to update you on where we are most recently with our Return to Learn plan. Thank you. If you recognize this graphic of a review of where we are and where we've been in our stages, the 5 stages that were introduced, teachers and students began this school year with improved distance learning model on August 31st. Small groups of students began to return for in-person instruction beginning on September 16th. The plan approved on September 1st indicated in-person learning would continue expanding as health metrics allow, following 5 distinct phases. The plan continues to change as needed. However, we do have guiding principles that will remain constant. The first and foremost is to protect the health and safety for all, accelerate academic progress for all students, ensure equity, promote social and emotional wellness of all students and staff, collaborate and communicate with family and community partners, and embrace the need to be adaptable. Stage 3 began on October 12th, and stages 1 through 3 focused on implementing distance learning for the majority of students. And while teachers and administrators have worked tirelessly, distance learning is subpar for many of our students. Stage 4 shifts the instructional focus from the learning directly from the computer screen to the students in the classroom. Parents are being surveyed to determine the number of students who will return to allow the next several weeks for school-level planning to accommodate the interest and the need for physical distancing, should we be able to begin on November 30th or in the future.
Good evening again, board members. Yesterday was the end of marking period 1, and we wanted to share some preliminary data with you this evening. The first graph shows the percentage of elementary students attending school on a weekly basis for marking period 1. The graph contains 3 years of attendance data. It is concerning that our elementary school attendance has decreased this year by a range of 3 to 5 percentage points when compared the previous 2 years. The next graph is similar to the elementary graph, but it provides the percentage of middle school students attending school on a weekly basis for marking period 1. Again, this graph is over a 3-year period. And again, we are concerned that middle school attendance has decreased this year by a range of 2 to 5 percentage points compared to the previous 2 years. The next graph provides the percentage of high school students attending school on a weekly basis for marking period 1, again over a 3-year period. High school attendance has decreased this year by an approximate range of 1 to 3 percentage points weekly when compared with the previous 2 years. Sometimes looking at just percentages doesn't put it into pure numbers of what that actually means. Chronic absenteeism is defined as a student missing 10% of the school year. It is alarming that the number of chronic absenteeism students has doubled at the elementary level, nearly doubled at the middle school level, and increased at the high school level. The next slide is a comparison of interim 1 failures last year to this year at the middle school level. The graph identifies the percentages of failures by department. Again, we are concerned that 24% of our middle school grades are failures, and that number has more than doubled from last year at this time. And again, just so the board members understand, this is the percentages of failures in English, math, science, social studies, world language, electives, and then that all category at the end. The next slide is the high school interim 1 percentage failures from 2019-20 to 2020-21, again by department. Many of our high school failure rates by department have doubled as well. I would like to point out that our AP Other category shows that failures have doubled in AP classes outside of our other core departments as well. If this data holds, it could have major short and long-term impact on our students graduating on time. I want to caution the board that we believe that students, parents, teachers, administrators, and staff are trying their best. We visit classrooms on a regular basis, and we're amazed by the ingenuity and passion of our teachers. No teacher wants to see their students be unsuccessful. We are very fortunate to have a great staff. We believe that our challenges with attendance and academic performance is due to teaching and learning through a distance learning platform. 92% of our teachers shared concerns for the social emotional learning of our students. We know that the majority of our students perform better when they have the opportunity to be in the classroom with the teacher and their peers. It has now been 33 weeks since all of our students have had the opportunity to attend school. While we do not have a start date for stage 4, we do believe that everyone should be planning and working together to get our students back to the classroom in a safe manner. Our Stage 4 plan will meet the academic and social emotional needs of our students, and again, ensure that we are doing so in a safe manner. There is no start date that as a community we will all agree on. We will continue to monitor the daily positivity rate and the new cases per 100,000. Some of our neighboring school districts have now been successfully open for 9 or 10 weeks. Our Stage 4 plan replicates the successful return of pre-K and kindergarten students during Stage 3. As outlined in our Return to Learn plan, all first grade students will have the opportunity to return to in-person learning. Students in grades 2 through 5 will follow an A-Day, B-Day schedule. This is a change from our original plan because WCPS is following the 6-foot physical distancing recommendation. Secondary students will follow an A-Day, B-Day schedule, as outlined in our original Return to Learn plan. All schools will return to their original start times, and their day will end 45 minutes early. Our teachers have shared the additional time has been useful for collaborative planning, grading, and communicating with parents. This time can also be used to meet the professional development needs of our staff. In Stage 4, our parents have the option for in-person or distance learning. A-Day students attend school Monday, Wednesday, and alternating Fridays for in-person learning. B-Day students attend school every Tuesday, Thursday, and alternating Friday for in-person learning. Our A-Day, B-Day model allows for students to be in school on a consistent basis without long gaps. Students will have the ability for more in-person learning with this model. This will not only benefit our students academically, but we'll be able to serve our students in other ways. One such example is through our meal service. We know that it's a challenge for our students to visit our meal sites without transportation. We envision being able to serve our students breakfast, lunch, and a possible take-home dinner on the days they attend. We hope to expand on our summer model, where students would be able to take home meals for the following day while they're learning at home. We also believe this schedule will allow more opportunities for the mental health services that our schools provide. Stage 2 and 3 students who are currently participating in in-person learning may continue to attend every day, and our school administrators will decide which students attend on A-days and B-days. Here is an example of what a December A-day, B-day schedule would look like. I could pick January, February. This is not to imply that we're starting in December. Instead, this is just for visual purposes of how an A-day, B-day looks over the course of a month. The concurrent teaching and learning model allows for physical distancing and for every student to attend school 2 to 3 days a week. The concurrent A-day, B-day model allows for 30 hours of instruction a week. There is a shift from distance learning to an in-person classroom experience. We will continue to utilize technology to make the process more efficient. We've purchased televisions, huddle cameras, headphones with microphones, Apple TVs, projectors, and new student and staff devices. None of that will make concurrent learning easy. The technology allows us to better communicate with our students in our classroom and our students at home. Our new hybrid learning site is a collection of all the great strategies that we've seen from teachers and staff all over the county.
So it's important to seek feedback from all of our stakeholders, and immediately following the announcement of a Stage 4 and the planning that went into that work, teachers and educational support personnel received a survey. The survey is open through Thursday of this week. However, tonight we'll share some preliminary data. This morning at 10 a.m., 1,394 people had responded, and 47.9% of teachers do not feel well informed about the safety measures being taken to return students to school. The top 3 priorities regarding health and safety practices included maintaining physical distancing, coordinating schedules to limit crowding, and requiring masks and face covers for everyone. The graphics you're about to see were extracted on Sunday, and they represent 1,350 responses. The question asked, how confident are you that you will be able to teach effectively while following safety protocols, for example, wearing a mask? 42.9% indicated that they were not very confident or not at all confident in the orange and red. When asked, how confident are you that you'll be able to manage and enforce safety protocols among students, for example, maintaining physical distancing, 76% responded that they were not very confident or not at all confident, again, represented in the orange and red. To the question, I have the curriculum resources needed, 66% agreed or strongly agreed, and those are represented by the blue and green. As of this morning at 10 a.m., 478 ESP had responded. When asked the top 3 health and safety priorities, ESP responded requiring masks and face coverings for everyone was the first priority, maintaining physical distancing, and cleaning the surfaces in the school. As you look at this graph, 24% of ESP do not feel well informed about the safety measures being taken to return students to the school, again represented in the orange and yellow. So we have work to do. In response to the data that we've gathered, it is critical that we be sure that all of our staff are reminded of the health and safety protocols. They may not have previously needed them necessarily if they didn't have students attending in front of them. So it's understandable, but it's something that we need to make sure that we address. The health and safety protocols were included in the first version of the Return to Learn plan on August 14th. And then again, each time, anytime there's been an adjustment by our health departments, it's been updated. The last update was in September. We also know that it's critically important to reinforce the proper use of a mask, wearing it over your mouth and nose consistently. We know that we are committed to offering responsive professional development. Teachers were asked a question about what would be helpful for them, and so there was a list for them to choose from, and then an other category. So we'll analyze the data and make sure that we're providing what would be helpful. We're committed to continue working collaboratively with our associations and with our ANS representatives. We meet with them Wednesdays.
Well, at least
I was
Wednesday
just
and
thinking of
Thursday.
last week. Last week we went quarterly
Okay,
meeting on
Wednesday,
Monday
Thursday,
with our Teachers Association, and then Wednesday as a joint meeting with Dr. Michael with all of the groups. And then on Thursday, we have staff meeting with the senior leadership with the leadership of both associations. So we're committed to continuing to do that, to work through issues collaboratively and to clarify things that may be miscommunicated. We also feel that it's very important to engage our wellness committee in providing healthy activities. The COVID has had an impact on everyone's mental health, everyone's outlook, and we do think it's important and it's something that we can do to support our teachers and have our teachers support one another. We also want to gather additional feedback from parents. Parents were surveyed, a very brief survey that simply asked, if we were to return to learn on November 30th, would you send your children? If you would send your children, do they need a bus? And so we really need a little bit more information about how school is working for them and for their children. And finally, we know that we're going to continue to revise and evolve in this Return to Learn plan, and that we're not alone. The entire state of Maryland, and in fact the nation, is looking for the best way to do this so that all students learn.
Okay, with that, we'd be glad to take any questions you might have tonight. We'll obviously continue to provide the board with updates. I think we've been giving you copies of this more as we're sending out to parents, to staff members, things like that. But if there's any questions, the team and I would be glad to take them. Mr. Stauffer.
I have several, but I'll just ask one right now and then allow colleagues to ask other questions, and then I'll come back. I'll start with the easy one. I've heard you say before, Dr. Michael, that you didn't, I believe I heard this when we first started with COVID and everything, you didn't like AB day schedules, but now they're incorporated into the plan, so.
I said that wouldn't be the ideal way to start. I mean, some of the school districts are looking at that as their mainstay. You know, I think for our special ed children, our homeless children, our English language learner population, some of those children, I think, and that's what Dr. Pugh and Dr. Willard just described. Their stage 2 and stage 3 children would be there every day. So that part is what would be different about our plan than some of the other county plans that have talked about A-Day-B Day. I think we need to recognize that while the 6 foot is a guideline, staff has talked about should we relax that, and I haven't given on that. I think we need to maintain the 6 foot distancing. I know there's some debate about those types of things, but it certainly has to be more helpful than being closer. So in order to maintain that, our plan since August 14th has been an A-Day-B Day for grades 6 through 12, with the exception of our stage 2, stage 3 children. But yeah, I'd prefer to be there every day, but that's just not possible at this time.
Colleagues, anyone else?
I have a question. We've gotten a few emails of people saying that they don't feel like PPEs are available at adequate levels. Could you just respond to that?
I'll have Mr. Prue respond. What I can say is, to my knowledge, we spent about $1 million on PPE materials. Mr. Prue knows how many times I've asked, he's assured me, but I've asked for him to reassure me. Gowns, masks, face shield, booties, gloves, hand sanitizer. We've spared no expense to make sure that we have adequate materials and supplies. We've all become pretty proficient at cleaning up after ourselves and others and things like that. But Mr. Prue, if you provide an update on that.
I can. We actually looked at an inventory today. I'm trying to pull it up, but there's no lack of PPE. For a while, late spring, we really felt like PPE was going to be a bit of a challenge. Pricing on a number of items, of course, skyrocketed when demand was up, but there was very little supply available. Pricing has come down on a number of things. For instance, like on disposable masks, pricing got to about 50 cents per mask. We're now down in the upper teens, somewhere between about 18 and 21 cents when we do a procurement. But to give you a sense of what is currently available in our most current inventory, we have about 200,000 disposable adult masks, 63,000 pediatric masks, and we have recently ordered another, I believe it was 50 or 75,000 pediatric disposable masks. We were able to distribute a shipment of cloth masks that were given to us. We still have about 2,700 available in inventory here. I received a call from MSDs last week, and there's another shipment of 43,000 cloth masks coming to us, both in adult and in pediatric sizes. Probably will receive those later this week or early next week, and we can distribute those to our schools for both staff and students to use. We have approximately 3,500 clear masks that are used in a speech pathology or hard of hearing situation, or in some cases with EL or foreign language classes where the mouth needs to be seen for instruction. We have currently about 4,500 gowns with another 10,000 on order that should be here end of this week, early next week. About 9,000 face shields and more shoe covers than I hate to think about. We ordered those early on, and there's been very little call amongst those from our staff. And we continue to order vinyl and nitrile gloves as is needed for our health rooms or for just general use in the classroom, and in various sizes from small through extra large. And there's hundreds of cases of gloves throughout the district right now, with more on order.
Let me ask it this way. If a teacher's feeling like they don't have access to PPE, what should they do?
I think, my number one answer for parents and for teachers, staff, anybody, is ask your principal. That is the key person that should be able to respond to any PPE challenge, any concern that anybody's not following protocol. That's the go-to person. If they can't answer the question, they're the person that can contact somebody that can answer the question. But I'm very confident Mr. Prue is absolutely correct that we have a substantial supply, and I know that I've asked, and he has reassured me that now things are readily available. Mr. Prue, I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of gallons, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of gallons of hand sanitizer we've ordered at this point, have on hand. I see the gallon bottles. Again, I'm in schools every day. It's rare that I'm not in schools 5 days a week, but sometimes it's, if I'm away, or 4 days a week or something. But every room I go in and out of, I see the gallon bottle of hand sanitizer there. Children are wearing masks. I'm really pleased to see our 4-year-olds, because I really thought that would be a real struggle. But that has not been a significant issue. We do have a couple children that, have some other challenges that they are struggle with the mask. I think it's a chance that any of us could get relaxed at any point, put our guard down, get too comfortable. And I think it's just up to all of us just to continue to remind ourselves throughout this, everybody has a part in this, to wear a mask, to constantly be thinking about our distance from each other,
wash our hands, use hand sanitizer regularly. And that goes for adults, for children, for guests. So we just need to constantly be aware of that and just work together on that. But if there's any doubt about PPE, if the principal can't answer the question, anybody's free to call me direct. I'll bring things to you immediately if for any reason you'd be out. I cannot imagine us running out of anything at this point with the extensive inventory that we have. I don't think any will go to waste, even the booties. I mean, eventually we'll donate them to the hospital or something. But we don't want to be reckless with our spending. But we are not going to, it's not going to be a lack of supplies, at least at this point.
And if I can add as well that our head custodians in every building are sending sort of a weekly or very rough weekly inventory to the operations team so that then we can replenish based on that inventory. So that we've got a pretty, ongoing weekly, tickler coming from the schools going, hey, I need this, or I only have this in inventory, and then we're sending a shipment back to them out of a mass supply here, and then restocking from here.
Other questions?
Go ahead, Stan.
I'm going to quote this. This is from an email, personal email that I received from a WCPS instructor, so bear with me. The writer said that staff members and parents of children are not told if their child was in the classroom of a teacher or a child who tested positive for COVID. The writer writes, my whole teacher team was out with COVID or COVID exposure and received the same call and email that all staff and parents at my school received, saying that I was not at high risk of COVID exposure and that people who were high risk were contacted privately by the school. And that same writer said that daycare centers and other places are putting a simple note on doors and stuff saying apparently that your child was in a classroom where someone was positive and so forth. They talked the whole thing about transparency that, I'll say it this way, the writer apparently doesn't like the way we contact people and make people aware of COVID exposure and stuff. So how would you respond to that?
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Prue, because he's become our resident expert, respond to it specifically. I would say in general, for people who believe we're not being transparent, at this point we have sent thousands. I don't even think it's an exaggeration to say thousands of notices to parents, to whole schools when we've had COVID cases or contact as part of our contact tracing. So if we're not being transparent, if you're going to send out thousands of correspondences somewhere, I don't know when would be enough. I think really it's the fear, and I can appreciate the fear people have. The balance of this is trying to protect the identity of people. So if we're going to put up on a billboard on the front door of the school, Boyd Michael has COVID, it'd be a violation of my rights. At the same time, we want to make sure people who have had close contact, that we've done our contact tracing appropriately. We've been trained well by the health department. We have an extensive team that works every day to follow up on things like that. So I think part of it is everybody wants to know, and it's not unusual for a whole variety of things. Everybody wants to know what happened with an out-of-school suspension or some other circumstance. And we can't always share everything about everybody. But we are taking no chances with the health of our staff. If they need to know, they will be contacted. Mr. Prue has a whole protocol they go through. We work with Janice House, our health nurse here. We work with the health department every day. But, I mean, I can't thank Mr. Prue enough for his work. I talk to him, unfortunately, almost every Saturday and Sunday about things that happened over the weekend, some of our people that aren't even in person, or some of our sports teams and things like that. So we are constantly keeping up on it. It's a very, very extensive effort. We could provide a list, but I think people would pretty quickly be identified as individuals, and then I think we'd be dealing with lawsuits over violating somebody's rights because somebody felt like they needed to know rather than they needed to know. Again, I can appreciate the fear that people are having and things like that. I would recommend this. All of us should treat each one of us like any one of us could have COVID at any time. That is the best way to be thinking about this disease. Protect yourself at all time, protect others at all time. So Jeff, you understand our whole protocol. You live, dream, sleep it more hours
do,
a day
unfortunately.
than I'm
Um,
sure you want to think about.
And I think, Mr. Stauffer, I think Dr. Michael hit the nail on the head. I mean, ultimately, the HIPAA Privacy Act law has not been decreased due to the pandemic.
Well, let me say that the writer stated that he or she did not want to know specific names.
Right, but we need to think this through, especially in our current situation where in some cases there may only be 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals in a classroom. And so we tell a teacher, let's say, that someone in your classroom has had COVID. And I forgive every parent who has a child named Johnny, but little Johnny disappears for 10 days. And Johnny is now out sick or just out for 10 days. And he's the only one that's out for 10 days. Well, you know who has it. And so in doing that, we've violated Johnny's rights. So we need to be very careful about how we present that information. And oftentimes we're discussing with staff when we're not sure about general activities. We may not be sure about something that's going on, let's say at recess on the playground or in an encore class. We're having discussions with teachers as vaguely as we can without sharing appropriate information and personally identifiable information about a student in a particular case. But it is a very, very fine line that we have to draw to protect the privacy of the individual who's infected.
I have one more if no one does.
Mike has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Willow, you had stated students perform better when in the classroom. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think Dr. Michaels has indicated numerous times that he feels basically the same way about having this. It's very disappointing to look at these failures and knowing that we work so hard, I say we, staff, your staff, has worked so hard to get these students up to grade level. And then with basically the pandemic just wiping all that work away. And yet, I know you don't have the answer, but it seems like for me, that answer would be to get them kids back into the classroom as quickly as we possibly can, because in my opinion, we're not going to get caught up. I think evidence shows us that after third grade, if we do not get these students, they'll never catch up. And I think with high schoolers that we're seeing the rate of failure, middle school, the rate of failure, we are going to be playing catch up for years and years to come if we do not get these kids back into a classroom setting. And especially the ones that are failing, that we know that some thrive at home and they're doing well, but the ones that are not, that are this is a comment was made from a student. I'm glad to see my teacher from the waist, from the neck down. I mean, they need that connection with a teacher other than what's on a screen. To see a child say, I'll know if I get back to class and to school, I'll have a hot meal. These are things that are just heartbreaking. And I know you get your heart broke as everybody else here, but the only way that we're going to fix this is to get these kids back. And I don't know how we do it. That's up to you guys, because you guys are the experts on that, but we got to get them back, because if not, these numbers that are 23 and 23.9% failure are just going to go up higher and higher. And I know that that's got to be heartbreaking for you, because you and your staff have worked so hard to get these numbers and get these children up in the grade levels, and now we're just going to get wiped out. I mean, we've got to think of ways and ideas, and I know we discussed, certain things, and this is for you to work on and your team finding a way to do it. But we've got Funkstown School that's sitting empty. We have, I don't know if we can get care money and family first monies that we can get portable classrooms, mandatory summer school. I mean, it's got to happen. We have City Core out there with a child care center that's sitting empty. Open more classrooms at Cascade for virtual learning or taking those classes that are in multiples. possibly even evening classes. I mean, we've got to figure something out. We just can't continue to sitting with these kids at home and watching this failure rate can continually increase. I can't imagine how you sleep at night. I don't, because I know you and your staff work so hard, and I can't even imagine the hours that you're putting into to think that all that work you've done is getting undone real quickly. So my thing is just get these kids back. You know, I know that our teachers are concerned. I understand that. I feel sorry for them, but they're educated. Our students aren't, and they need to get educated because these kids, once they get out of high school, if they're not educated, they're not going to get any educated. But our teachers are educated, and they're smart enough, and they know how to fix this, and they know how to teach because they've done it. And I know that they can survive and manage this. Our students that are uneducated can't. And this is the ones that I'm concerned about the most. So I would say.
Dr. Willow, Dr. Pugh, can you share with us some ways that you're addressing the situation with attendance, especially those that are chronically absentee?
Well, we continue to work with our families. So anytime a student is absent, the parent gets a phone call the same day home. When we have students that are absent for more than one day, our assistant principals, our administrators get together on a weekly basis to review, to make home visits, to follow up. Counselors might reach out. Really what it comes down to a lot of time is who has the best relationship with the student, who has the best relationship with the family, and who's that person that can reach out. And so I think there are a lot of different reasons why we're seeing the attendance where it's at. I think for some students right now, there is a disconnect to school. There is that, well, I'm not in every day. You know, I get on and I Zoom, but it is harder to build relationships through a distance learning platform. It's not impossible, but it's harder. And so I think what we're going to continue to do is work with our students just to meet, to add to what Mr. Gesford, his comments. Many of our schools are running after-school tutoring programs. We are using tutoring funds for after-school evening tutoring activities. We also have some schools running Saturday schools to help students get caught up. That's actually continuing from last spring. Just this week, we had a number of schools submit and share that we had students go back and were able to do some recoveries, real-time recoveries, for not participating for fourth marking period. So we are trying to get creative on our ways to get students caught up because we firmly believe, and I've always said this as a principal, when a student feels successful and they have that relationship, they're more likely to engage in those daily activities, and that's really what this is about.
Thank you. Are you
I was going to say our PPWs are working hard, our dropout prevention people are working on this effort. Family liaisons are involved in trying to get students to school. We have quite a few other connections. Our new social workers and things that were added to the budget last year have all these people are trying to contribute. It's just saddening to see that the numbers are still what they were after all this effort. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's right. Thank you.
We constantly get emails. So this is just, I'll just cite one, but we constantly get emails from teachers and staff saying that teachers are stressed out, that they're overloaded and so forth. They don't have enough planning time, this type of thing. One person suggested having a half day or a full day of planning during regular work hours. I don't know if that can be worked into the schedule or not. That we're not asking teachers for feedback about things that can be worked out, this type of thing. So, you know, it's the idea that everything's coming from the top down, and we're not collaborating enough with individual teachers and with the association and so forth like that. So, response to that?
Well, I think we tried to indicate before, I mean, the ideas of how we got started this year, the whole schedule from this year, all came from things we heard last year. So one of the things we heard over and over last year was the need to contact parents and be in communication with parents. So the way we started out the year, for the majority of the staff from the first hour of the day, 8 to 9 o'clock, particularly for elementary, was designed to be parent contact time for emails and phone calls. There's concern about the amount of planning time, so we had a very reduced schedule in the number of hours that teachers taught a day. The majority of our classroom teachers, I believe, taught 3 hours. The student got 3.5 hours by the time they picked up their encore class, particularly in elementary. So I believe the balance of the day for planning, collaborative planning, those types of things. Help me out here, staff. Other things that we put into place, even from our stage 4, which originally was a full day of school. We've reduced that by 45 minutes. That's going to be a hardship on our families because they'll have to provide an additional 45 minutes of childcare, even on the days their children are attending school, but that's in response to hearing from teachers regarding planning time here in stage 4. We've heard from staff that they feel they'd be too crowded in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade if we had all students return. So we cut that back to an A-day, B-day. All these are in response to things that we've heard directly from staff. The concept of buying televisions as an extra monitor came directly from a teacher. Conversations I had yesterday regarding watercolor paint sets, the old ones that I had when I was a kid, we still use those. A little 8 or 9 inch white thing that flips up with the watercolors in there. Teachers describing to me how it would be beneficial to have those and additional markers for every art class. Conversation with several music teachers just coincidentally hit their planning period at 3 different schools yesterday. Feedback from them on some mask requirements that they still need or instruments that they could use so the kids don't have to wipe them down or the staff doesn't have to wipe them down. And I've already met with Micah Stocks and Dr. Willow, and we're already taking those ideas directly from teachers, and we're trying to respond. Somebody was having concerns with their MacBook Air that's now 6 or 7 years old and not able to run some of the music programs that they have even for elementary. So we're hearing directly from teachers. The meetings that Dr. Pugh mentioned, I think now I'm on my 5th or 6th week in a row of meeting directly with the union leadership, both ESP, WCTA, and the A&S group. We're taking that feedback every day. We're reading the emails you're reading, certainly taking good ideas from that, also trying to glean from that, what makes sense. Again, to say we're rushed and things like that, and then I need to reflect that pre-K and kindergarten are back. Some people with full classes of 20 students teaching every single day, the same group of kids, day after day after day, and other people want 10 and 12 and 15 weeks to get ready. I struggle to understand it other than fear, concern, unknown, some things like that. So we're working through those things. I think we are listening. Because we're not doing exactly what somebody says they want to have happen, doesn't mean we're not listening. Again, we picked November 30th in response to our next step is we need to find out who is interested in returning. That's the only way we can make our next step, our next preparation. The logical questions, I looked at staff and said, what are parents going to need to know in order to make that decision? They're going to need to know roughly when are you talking about potentially turning and what am I returning to? So that's how we got to the point of listening to staff and adjusting stage 4. One of our emails the last couple of days, it made it sound like stage 4 was just created. Stage 4 has been in our book since August 13th when we posted it to our website as required by the state. The only thing we've done is made adjustments based on what teachers have requested. Reducing class size 2, 3, 4, and 5, shortening the day to allow for additional planning time. We're maintaining the 6 foot, different than some of our neighboring counties, actually in other states. So I think we are responding. I think, as Mr. Willow pointed out earlier, we have to work on this together. It's a very challenging situation. To Mr. Gassford's point, my heart and passion's in educating children. I won't do that at the risk of children or staff, but I will not give up trying to educate our children. I cannot. The day I do that, you should either fire me or I should quit. But I am passionately going to pursue educating our children. This is a daggone mess for them as it is for staff, But we've got to continue to find a way the best we can. And that is not going to be putting our staff at great risk or putting our students at great risk. But we cannot stop. We cannot just say we're just going to look at it in 2 or 3 months. We will need to look at it week by week. If it's not November 30th, maybe it's the middle of December. Maybe it's the day before we get out for winter break. Maybe it's not till March. Maybe it's not till next September. But we have to continue to look at it, and it needs to be as soon as we possibly can for the sake of our children and the lives we're trying to change forever for good. I don't know if she's calling on you or if I am. I'm sorry.
Mr. Bickham?
Sorry, I would just like to return to Mr. Peru's comments on if like a student has like COVID, like the privacy aspect. So how do you balance a student's right to like privacy if they have that with like another student's right to health? So like I just want like more explanation on that. Like if a student has COVID, do they have like are they mandated to go quarantine? Or to protect their privacy, would they stay in the classroom and be a risk to others? I just like some explanation on that.
No, absolutely. A student who is positive for COVID-19 is mandated to isolate for at least 10 days, must have a reduction in symptoms, and be at least fever-free for 24 hours. And we ask in our health and safety plan that the student and their family receive a medical release to return from the health department or their physician, and that's for staff and for students. Someone then who is quarantined based on being identified as a close contact to someone who has COVID-19 is asked to quarantine for 14 days. And those are metrics. The 10 days and the 14 days are set by the CDC and the Maryland Department of Health. So they're not our rules, they're other rules. And we follow those. And as we've gone through this now for a significant period of time, we're finding that rules ebb and flow and continue to change. So some of the staff and some of the parents may have received an email in the last week or a phone call in the last week from their principal about what's now known as a perceived case. So this is a situation where someone has multiple COVID-like symptoms and for whatever reason is not testing. And there may be multiple reasons for the child or the staff member to not test, but they're not testing. We're treating that, and we're advised to treat that as a positive case by the Washington County Health Department. So we provide the same notifications, we do the same contact tracing, and we deal with the same isolation periods and quarantine periods with a perceived case as we would with a tested case. So it continues to evolve. And then on the quarantine side, some quarantine periods can last 24 days or more. So a quarantine is a close contact as opposed to an isolation for a sick person. So if one of my family members has COVID-19 and I'm not able to isolate from that sick person, my quarantine period can't begin until their isolation period ends. So in some cases, a student or a staff member may be out for as many as 24 days based on those rules. And that's something that's we found has changed recently in the last couple of weeks, where we've seen that, I would say over the last month, we run into that more with the health department, where someone is not being released for as many as 24 days.
Thank you. That clarified.
Sure.
My comment.
Did you have another question, Mr. Stauffer?
Yeah, I've heard people say, and I'm sure some of you have too, that we're moving faster to put kids back in school than any other school district in the state of Maryland. So how would you explain that to the public out there, why we're moving faster than the other 23 districts?
I don't know what every district's doing. I know that Allegheny has added back each week. They've been adding back. I think Monday they added back 5th grade. So they've been working themselves up one grade at a time. So Monday was 5th grade. Their metrics are obviously higher than ours at this point. Some other districts are planning on November 9th being a start date for them. Almost everybody has special ed or small groups back, and which similar to our stage 3 and stage 2 and stage 3 kids. I think all but 8 or 9 districts have those kids back. Even I saw in the paper, I don't know, it's Maryland Roundup or something, just a brief line that said Baltimore City schools just had 20-some additional schools add small groups apparently this week. So I think we're pretty much in line with those districts that have allowed small groups back. That's really what our stage 2 and stage 3 kids are. If we make it to stage 4, we'll probably be somewhere to 8 or 9 other districts that are already back in an 8AB day or some partial 8AB day. It's hard to keep up with, plans of people and actual what's happened with various counties. But I know the plans for a number of counties have been to be back.
There's the big criticism that if we do go with the November 30th date, if that flies, you're going to have people coming back from Thanksgiving and a lot of gatherings and everything. How would you respond to that?
Well, again, November 30th was a date we picked that no sooner than. Certainly might be something we take a look at if the metrics are such that we could come back. Maybe we move that date to Wednesday or Thursday. That would give a full week since Thanksgiving. I think the majority of symptoms show up in 2 to 4 days. If we start like on a Thursday of that week, whatever that date would be, that'd only be our A-day kids or B-day kids, whoever would be starting first. I think also on the 30th of November, we have about 5,500, 6,000 kids that are returning that are part of Stage 2, Stage 3. So those children are coming back on November 30th unless for some reason we don't allow them to come back that day. So again, there's nothing firm about November 30th at all. We needed to set a target that'd be no sooner than, and we just need to continue to watch that. We do have a fairly long December. Most Decembers, we only have 14, 15 days. I think there's 17 days in December. That might be counting November 30th. So if we got 10 days, then would be a start. So we just don't know. It might not be at all this year that we make it to Stage 4. I'd hate to think that, but that's certainly possible. Every day is a new day with COVID. So
I have a couple other things, but I'll put them in an email.
Anyone else?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pugh and Dr. Willow. Just a couple other comments, board members. Last week had the opportunity, hope some of you did too, to see some of our athletic programs start back up. Didn't make it out last night. I think we had very limited people last night, and this evening, obviously, we don't. Although I think tonight's another late night, but obviously tonight we're here. But it's great to see our athletes back on the field, back on the courts playing. To our spectators and everyone that's cooperating with us, I know you don't like the two guest rule for our athletes, but we really need to maintain that safety for our students, our athletes, and also those protect their academic program going. To our coaches, athletic directors, administrators, all these people that made it possible to get the athletics back up and rolling. We certainly appreciate their efforts. And I can only encourage our athletes, please, 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 at every opportunity, maintain social distancing, pull your mask up, abide by the rules on the sideline. All those things will help us keep athletics going as well as our academic program. Just want to let parents know, first marking period ended today. Or actually yesterday officially. Grades should be available in parent view and student view no later than November 11th. For secondary, no later than November 13th for elementary. And our plan at this point is to mail report cards to every parent to make sure that they do receive grades by the week of November 15th. Our meal sites were mentioned earlier. They continue to operate from 11:30 to 12:30. There are 20 of those locations. We've now been approved at our meal sites to provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner for all people 18 years and under. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that. You do not need to be a free and reduced meal student to receive free meals. Obviously, those students that are in school are receiving their free breakfast and lunch and will continue to do so. But I would encourage people to take advantage of those opportunities if they're in need of food for their children, that we're now providing 3 meals a day.
Dr. Michael,
And,
can I-
yes, sir.
Are we funding that through our food services fund or through
Actually,
grants?
federal government's picking up some reimbursement on that, so we're able to do that. It's not costing us additional funding. It's actually helping us pay for some staffing that'll help reduce our deficit. We're still, I think, predicting a $2 to $3 million deficit, assuming we remain open. For any reason we go backwards in our stages, that deficit will grow significantly unless we lay staff off. If we expand and are able to get to Stage 4, we'll actually shrink that deficit significantly because we'll obviously be feeding a great many more children every day.
Thank you.
So yeah, but that's provided by the federal government reimbursement program. So that assistance is available through the school system for children across the county. And if you're in need of food at all, between that, our food banks, our Micah backpack programs, generosity of our community, there's certainly ways to have our children fed.
I do want to give credit for this last piece to Mr. Haynes, who was here earlier, our HR department, our public information department. Next week will be Veterans Day, so we wanted to recognize our veterans within the school system a little bit differently. We've identified approximately 70 veterans in 27 of our schools. I don't think we probably caught them all. It was kind of a voluntary, let us know if you're a veteran. So quite obviously, we may have missed some people. Those people represent 607 years of service, those that we've identified. We're very grateful for our men and women that have served, that are continue to serve in the armed forces. So we thank them for their service. We thank our community members that are veterans. Mr. Stafford, we don't have you up in our video here today, but we thank you for your service as a veteran, again, as well as men and women across our county. We're grateful. It's just going to be a little unusual next week. We won't have our traditional Veterans Day ceremonies as we've had in the past, but I'm sure schools will continue to recognize our veterans. And again, credit to staff for pulling together and the participation from our veterans. Little tribute here that we have. And when the video's over, Mrs. Williams, that'll conclude my comments. So, Ms. Sanders, here we go. And thank you to our veterans. Yep.
Very nicely done. Thank you to all our veterans. Okay, Next on the agenda is personnel action. Dr. Pugh?
Good evening. As discussed earlier in closed session, I'm here to ask for approval of personnel's actions.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Is there a motion?
Move to accept the personnel report.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any questions for Dr. Pugh? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of accepting personnel actions as discussed earlier this afternoon? Okay, we have 5 affirmative votes. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Reports to the board. We'll have our board member committee reports. Any chairs wishing to report? Please, Mr. Bickford.
Finance Committee met last Tuesday to go over the budget adjustments, which you approved today, as well as receiving quite an extensive report on grants, many of them due to COVID, and also to just once again surprised by the reduction in interest rates for our major funds. So those are the 3 highlights from the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Anyone else? Mrs. Murray?
The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met at Tech High last Tuesday to tour the new programs, and it was absolutely wonderful. The only bad thing about the programs is the fact that they're limited to the number of students they can have because they're just absolutely wonderful. They do such a great job. And we will be meeting this month, Tuesday, November 24th, at 4 p.m. here at the CES to look at the new additions to the program of studies.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Anyone else for committee report? Okay, then we'll move to miscellaneous business. There's one item under that. It's future agenda items. You should have in your packet a list of future agenda items. And at Mr. Gessler's request, I will not be reading all of them or any of them. Should you have a suggestion for a future agenda, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know. And we'll go then to board member comments. Mr. Gessler, would you like to begin, please?
I have nothing for this evening. I think I've spoken enough.
Thank you. Mr. Stauffer?
This COVID stuff is, I tell you, I personally lost some sleep because I worry about the failure rates, but I don't know what to do. I mean, that's why I leave it to you. I would like to say this on a personal note. I had this week learned of the deaths of 2 former colleagues, Rosemarie Williams, longtime coach, PE teacher at Williamsport High School, with whom I taught for about 3 more decades, I guess. And then I heard of the death, I think just yesterday, of former supervisor of athletics, Ed Massoud. Ed was one of a kind. There wasn't any gray area in his life. Things were either black or white. There was no gray area. And on another note, he was one of the few people that had a doctorate that didn't use the title doctor. Because I had a fellow athletic director who always referred to him as Dr. Massoud. And I said, why do you call him Dr. Massoud? He doesn't have a doctorate. He said, yeah, he does. So I asked Ed one day, I said, you got a doctorate? He goes, yeah. He said, but I don't use the title. So, but he passed away.
Well, and I know you're in board member comments, and I know we would miss somebody, but I did see in the paper Mr. Buckley died. He was former purchasing supervisor. Gerald Holmes died a week or so ago. Mr. Lemmert, longtime service here to Student Services, died. So last couple of weeks has been, these are people, somewhat elderly gentlemen in our service, as well as Ms. Williams. But, it's kind of a era coming to an end, I guess.
Mr. Leverett was my first principal in the county. 1 year I spent at North High before I went to Williamsport.
He was my principal as a student, my 4 years of high school.
Mine too.
Mr. Bickford, your comments?
I have nothing further tonight, this evening. Thank you.
Mrs. Murray?
No, I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Bacone?
I would just like to say that I appreciate the various updates and the answering of our questions from WCPS leadership. And yeah, I have no further comments.
Thank you. I have no comments this evening. So if there's nothing further, we'll stand adjourned.